You can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. With palms down. Good morning, everybody. Good to see you all here. Thanks for being here. What a mess, right? I mean, we'll just get that out of the way now. It's just a mess we're all living in. That's it. It's an absolute mess. And here we are. I'll just cut through the burning question that will immediately arise the moment I open up to questions, which is, what do Buddhists do about? You observe it. You see it for what it is. Buddhist practice doesn't make messes easier. It doesn't solve what's going on. It doesn't give you the solution. It teaches you how to be with things as they are, honestly. Watch your emotions as they stir into fury and rage and anger and hatred. And it gives you the tools to settle yourself so you can then make a tiny bit of positive change in the world. That's it. You know, I've been leading this stuff, 15 years, twice a week doing this class. And every year, every couple months, every 6 months, every year, every whatever it is, there's always the thing that people want Buddhism to hopefully solve. And that thing becomes another thing. That makes sense? It doesn't minimize the disgusting tragedy that we're all experiencing and observing right now. It doesn't take away from the powerful impact that has on us, the families, the children, the teachers, every teacher. We see a lot of teachers in here at this place. Any teachers in the room? It's scary. I mean, this place, you know, when I say this place, Dharma Bum Temple, I feel like half the people that come here are teachers, the other half are therapists. You know? And it's a tough time. So, you know, my heart goes out to everybody. The fear that gets put into our minds is no joke. But the question is, then what? Now what do we do? Because if you sit with all of this anger and all of this fear and all of this hatred and all of this rage, what good comes of that? It must transform into a sense of what the Buddha taught very clearly: generosity, compassion, and wisdom. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is easy to do, but that's the practice. How do we give? What do we give? And I'm not going to give you answers. This is for each person to explore. But what can we give of ourselves, our time, our energy, our heart, to do our best to ensure that things like this do not continue to happen? For me as a practitioner, that's what my master always taught me. Do not take your anger and hatred and rage on other people. We just saw what happened when an 18-year-old takes his anger and hatred and rage onto other people. That kid needed love. That kid needed compassion. That kid needed care. The practice is to make sure we don't become that person living with anger and hatred and rage. And I know that because that was the majority of my life growing up, was filled with anger and hatred and rage. And that led to destructive actions, destructive behaviors towards self and others. So what can we give to the people who are suffering right now, to our friends that are suffering right now, to our teachers that are living in fear? How can we support them and be there for them? This is what the Buddha taught is the way to overcome suffering: generosity, to give your time, your attention, your heart, your ear, just to simply listen. Compassion is the second thing, and I touched on that a little bit. But to understand that if we engage in the world with anger, good doesn't come of that. Now, I want to clarify something. I am not suggesting, and this always comes up, I've been giving this talk around various topics for years. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't honor or recognize your anger. I'm not suggesting that your anger is bad or wrong. What I'm suggesting is that you recognize that anger that is in you and you transform it from anger and hatred into love and compassion. Very often when I talk about the anger is not helpful, people say, well, I am angry, and they just stay there. You ever been angry and pissed off and done lots of good things? It usually doesn't happen. There's a phenomenal book, we should get it, but it's called An's Anger. I just thought about this. I think it's ANHS, Anger. And Lisa, the teacher who has led our kids program for 10 years, she would always read it to the kids. And it's about transforming anger. There's a spoiler alert, but the anger in the book, it's a kid's book. Beautiful illustrations, is a monster. And at the end, the monster becomes a beautiful flower. And how to go from that feeling of being a monster, which is what anger drives us to do, into being the beautiful flower that provides compassion. Recognize the anger. It's not about justifying it. It's not about saying, well, I'm right to be angry. This is not about being right to be angry. The practice is not about justifying your emotions. The practice is about recognizing your emotions, transforming them. All not easy to do. And the third is wisdom. How do we apply wisdom to the mess of a world we're in right now? I don't know. I really don't. But what I do know, wisdom is how we overcome ignorance, as the Buddha taught. The third reason, this is just for those who are basic, brand new to Buddhism. We suffer from greed, anger, and ignorance. So we practice generosity, compassion, and wisdom. Wisdom is how we work through our ignorance. I don't know how to apply wisdom to this situation, but I know what the ignorance is. The ignorance is my attachment to my anger, and recognizing that if I don't transform that mind, then I'm going to have a really hard time creating any sort of change. My master always taught me that the bodhisattva practice is to create conditions that make it easier for other people to suffer less. She told me that 18 years ago, 19 years ago. And I have never forgotten that. What conditions can you create that will help others suffer less? When you do this, you come out of the sense of self. Me, me, me. And the Buddha taught that when we focus on the sense of self, all about me, we will suffer. When we remove ourselves from ourself, and we step away and we work on making life better for those around us, things change. None of this is easy to do. But we're not here because this is easy. You know, anyone here for the first time? I mean, I see most of you pretty familiar faces, but there's a couple brand new people in the back. It's always good to hide out in the back, because then if you hate it, you can run out, you know? And for those who are new, you know, on one hand, I'm sorry to jump in with such this heavy thing, but on the other hand, I'm glad to jump in with such a heavy thing because it's on all of our hearts and it's real. And for those who are brand new to either here or Buddhist practice, as I started talking about, Buddhist practice is not the escape. As soon as you leave here, you'll go back to all the social media, all the news outlets, all the everything, and you will be glued and wrapped up and sucked in to all of that. Rightfully so. And the challenge is, what are you going to do? And I don't know about you all, but if I continued to respond to the world the way I did for most of my life, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. Nor anywhere, for that matter. So the hard part, and then I'll stop and we'll start the meditation practice. The hard part in situations like this is recognizing how important it is to make sure that you take care of your own mental, emotional health and well-being first. And from that place, you can begin to create change around you. Beautiful teachings by Thich Nhat Hanh on engaged Buddhism. Buddhism, activism, beautiful. Do it. Martin Luther King. Look at what these guys taught. Last thing I will say, just for those who might be new, is Buddhist practice, just so you're all not confused, is not complacency. It is not just sitting there and watching the world pass you by. It's engaging in it, but coming from a place of loving kindness and compassion. And as it is taught, that loving kindness and compassion, it must start with yourself. So, with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start the meditation. I just wanted to make it a little bit easier for the person or people who were sitting there and waiting for the 20 minutes of meditation to end until they could raise their hand and ask the question about what do we do? So let's sit with that for a little bit. As far as the meditation, for those who are brand new or here for the first time, a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing is going to happen to you. You will not float away. You will not have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind will not shut off. It will not go blank. You will not think nothing. Your mind will continue to race. I will say things periodically to remind you that you're lost in thought and help you come back to the present moment using sensation of breath. Don't expect anything. If you're waiting for some grand aha moments or deep realizations, you'll be quite disappointed. You're just going to sit and breathe. Posture, you want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion or chair or bench, wherever you are often, pushing the stomach forward, relaxing the shoulders, hands can be in the lap or on the knees, whatever works for you. If you need to move, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. I will guide us as we begin, and we will settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice. Observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice, just sitting, breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing, and with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, and no one else to be. Everything exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing, Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's not from sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice, not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as I alluded to earlier. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is incredibly difficult and painful and tragic and horrific. And very often the present moment is beautiful and pleasant and kind and gentle. And this is our life. Moments that come and go, and our reactions to them. Often, especially if you're newer to practice, people think that meditation or Buddhism is going to fix things. This practice is like holding up a mirror and reflecting back on yourself. And that's why it's incredibly difficult. Because it's a lot easier to blame everyone else and everything else. It's a lot easier to point fingers and be angry at everyone around us. It's incredibly difficult and yet skillful and important to reflect back on our own thoughts and words and actions. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. But it is a practice. It's not a 6-week course that you graduate from and all of a sudden you get your Buddhist certificate. In fact, Buddhist practice isn't even about being Buddhist. Anyone in this room Buddhist? Look around. You see a half a hand and he's not even sure if he should put it up or not yet. Right? Give it a couple more years, you might get there, you know? It's not about being Buddhist. All of you in this room, you're coming from whatever religion you come from or lack thereof. Buddhists are not concerned with that. All they're concerned with is, are you kind and compassionate towards yourself and others? That's it. And can you be honest with how important and aware you are of your thoughts and words and actions? That's what makes this so hard. So, with that, I'll pause. I talked more at the beginning than normal, so I'll just open up now to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice. I really prefer that to respond to what's on your mind. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning for that. So thoughts, questions. And to all of our millions of YouTube followers, welcome. Sorry I didn't send you any love earlier. Thanks for being here.
I have my glasses on. Did you see
Yes, go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
It's funny because I tell people I'm going to the temple to go garden with the Buddhists, so that must be.
Right, you liar.
I don't know, this week I've been thinking about the statue of the suffering Buddha, because we all want that golden, wonderful meditation place, but that's been on my mind this week. And so we've talked about his life and journey and how he got to be where he is. So I'm going to like tell people about that stuff.
Yeah, I think in brief, without doing the whole story, to me, the heart of that statue, what Kara's referring to, is the emaciated Buddha statue. If you've never seen it or you're sitting in the back, you want to come look at it earlier or later, he's just near death. He is completely emaciated, and at that point of his life, at 29, he left home. He was a prince, all the wealth, all the riches in the world. He left home, roamed the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. And as a yogi at the time, they thought one of the practices was to overcome attachment to physical form. And so it said that he ate 1 grain of rice a day. And then he came to a riverbed and was offered food. All of his buddies were like, no, 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 he can't eat, you know. And he said something to the effect of, well, I'm hungry, right? I don't know his exact words, but so he took a bowl of food that was offered to him. He set it in the river. And he said, if this bowl goes against the stream, I'm going to eat. So the bowl went against the stream. He decided to eat. He regained his physical health. Those 5 guys left him. You know, they called him a sellout, a traitor, a food eater. You know, they're very upset with him. And again, without the whole long story right now, he then, you know, went and taught. 5 guys saw him. Above the exit sign right there is the image of that. Those are the first 5 disciples, and he taught them the 4 noble truths, the foundation of Buddhist teachings, that life is filled with suffering. The cause, which is our greed, anger, ignorance, is the 2nd noble truth. The 3rd noble truth is the ending of suffering, liberation. And the 4th is the path, the Eightfold Path, it's called. Having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. You can Google all that for free. 4 noble truths, Eightfold Path. And then he taught for 45 years, and at 80 he died. That's a very quick story. But this statue, what it represents and why we picked it when we opened the temple 15 years ago, is to recognize that that's us. We are not these enlightened Buddhas. Nowhere close. We are suffering. Not all the time, but a lot. And when we started the temple, we were physically, emotionally, spiritually near death. Just miserable. And wanting to create a safe space for people to bring their misery together. How fun did that sound? You know? Let's open up and bring together a bunch of people who are angry and pissed off and miserable. This will be a blast. You know? And 15 years later, we're still here. I'm not quite sure how, but here we are. You know? But that image is so powerful because what it taught us was that, hey, if this guy, he was just a dude, he's no different than any person in here. He ate, he slept, he went to the bathroom. We all do that. Some more or less than others. But he was near death. And he figured out how to end suffering or suffer less, as I like to put it. I don't wake up and think, how am I going to end suffering today? I think, how can I suffer less today so I can help other people suffer less? So it became very motivating and inspiring to understand that this journey, and again, for those who are new to Buddhism, the word suffering is so heavy and so extreme. And at times, we experience tremendous suffering. The tragedy we're all observing right now unfold. There's children, the parents, the teachers, the husband who died 2 days after from a heart attack after his wife, the teacher, was killed. So much tragedy, so much heavy suffering. But suffering in our lives is also little things, right? You don't like the temperature. You don't like the way your hair looks. You don't like the mayonnaise that's on your sandwich. You don't like the way the car got in front of you on the freeway. I mean, think of all the little things. Latte that was made the wrong way because they didn't put enough pumps of something in it. Think of all the little tiny things of suffering we experience. The Buddha called this dukkha, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. Our entire life is filled with these things. And often it is extreme and often it is somewhat meaningless. So we go through an entire range of dukkha throughout our day. But there's also an entire range of beauty and joy and happiness that can be found in your life if we focus on that. Not ignore the suffering, not just sweep it under the rug and pretend it doesn't exist. It's called spiritual bypassing. Really important to understand. Your spiritual journey doesn't elevate you above anybody else. It's not about having the right to just ignore the fact that, man, we are in pain a lot. And that's what that represents. Yeah, Chuck.
You know, I ran into another description of suffering because it is such a difficult concept. And there's a word that describes at least an aspect of it, bitterness.
Bitterness? You say,
Being bittersweet.
yeah, bitterness.
Life is bittersweet.
Absolutely.
That's the suffering.
Yes. A lot of words, and for some reason, I don't know why in the English language they stuck to suffering, and it's so heavy and extreme. But yeah, bitterness. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, Chaz.
Can you talk about kind of what the Buddha said about the middle path
Yeah.
and how we find our own middle path?
Yeah, so the Buddhist teachings on the middle path, and that's actually kind of continuing on the story. When he put the bowl in the river and it went against the stream, the first thing right there is just kind of a metaphor and example that Buddhist teachings are against the stream of, they were then and they are now, of what we would look at mainstream culture and society, right? No billboard up there or, social media ad that pops up on your phone 18,000 times a day is, for the most part, popping up and telling you you're okay, right? It's telling you you must have more. You must buy more, you must eat more, you must look more, whatever, everything. What you should wear, what you should eat, where you should go, what car you should drive. The whole system is set up to tell us that us as we are is not okay. Billions of dollars of advertising. And we become victims of that, right? That's why movies like Fight Club are so brilliant. It addresses all of that. Fight Club, The Matrix, and Groundhog Day. If you're brand new to Buddhism, just through those three movies and you're good. Fight Club, Matrix, and Groundhog Day, right? And so what the Buddha taught and introduced as the middle path, he went from one extreme as a prince to the renunciate path, right? Got rid of all his wealth, all his clothes, everything, put on a robe, shaved his head, and lived with 7 items. That was it, right? He had a robe, he had a needle and thread to sew the robe, he had a razor to shave his head, he had a bowl to beg for food. There were 7 items. That was it. I got 3 items sitting right here, and 1,000 more in my phone. So the question is, what is our middle path? And how do we find it? That is different for everybody. It's not so much that the Buddha laid out that this is the proper middle path. Right? For me as a practice, I think it's important to recognize where in your life do you find yourself living in excess or extreme? Or just more than you need, So then for me, I got a million stupid examples, but they're really hard to do, okay? So let's use Chaz. Okay, was looking at this morning. You have a hat right there, right? I think every time you hear it, you have a hat on, right? Most of the time, right? You're a hat guy.
Yeah.
How many hats do you have?
2.
Really? Oh, terrible example. Anybody? I really ruined that one. Well, no, I can still use that example. It's just not going to be as good, right? How many shirts do you have? You look like a shirt guy. How many shirts do you have?
Probably 20 or 30.
20 or 30. All right, let's go with 30. It just makes it easier. All right. Today, do you need all 30 shirts? No. You like all 30 shirts? Yeah. Today, when you go home, take 5 shirts. Give them away. Try it. Even just the thought, all of you right now, think about how many shirts you have. And think about all the people, 10,000 people living on the streets right now that have nothing but the shirt on their back. We got 30. Would you be okay with just 25 shirts?
Yeah.
Just think about right now, even as I introduce that, I want you to pay attention to what arises in you. I don't want to get rid of my shirts. They're my shirts. I paid for them. I earned my money. I deserve them. I'm entitled to them. Why should I give it away? You don't have to. But to practice the middle path, we have to look at the simple things in our lives that we have a lot of and try to find a balance there, right? We can do it with clothes, with shoes. We can do it with food, right? You ever eat out? How often a week you think would you say you eat out? Without getting too personal, you know?
Twice.
Twice a week, okay. So for the next month, try eating out once a week. On average, when you eat out, what do you spend? 15, 20 bucks? Okay. So for the next month, try once a week eating out for $15 or $20. That means the $15 or $20 that you would have spent the other time, you've now saved. Take that $15 or $20, buy a couple sandwiches, and hand them out to people who have nothing to eat. Right? The only way we can practice the middle path is seeing where in our lives we live in excess and cut it down a little bit. And these practices, they'll kind of make potentially you feel uncomfortable. And this is what the Buddha called attachment to self. We start to feel entitled, that we deserve these things. I've earned these things. I work so hard for these things. It's not all about us. These things are difficult, right? Houses, clothes, money, food, everyday things that we attach to. See what would happen if you did one of them a tiny bit less. I mean, giving away your house is a bad example, but unless you want to, you know. Find areas in your life where you could cut back and see what happens. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah. Shoes, you know. Anyone here like a total shoe rat? Like you got like 40 pairs of shoes? I saw your head nodding, right? So try these things. Doesn't make you a good or bad person or a good or bad Buddhist. But the question is, what are we so attached to that why we think these things are so important? You know? And I used to have tons of all the stuff I'm talking about. Right? I did the extreme, and I don't recommend that. Right? My first master said, Jeff, you work so hard to make so much money to buy so many things. If you didn't have so many things, you wouldn't need so much money. You wouldn't need to work so hard. That clicked for me. So I went from living a life of making a lot of money and spending a lot of money to making no money and spending no money. It took me about 2 years to work on that. And then I've come back, this is, 2005. But then I've come back to a balance, more middle path, not the extreme. But that for me was the way to do it. But I don't necessarily suggest all of that. Yeah. Other questions? Another place to recognize balance and kind of the middle path is just in your time and attention and relationship to people and how you interact. Find a balance with your emotions. Find a middle path with your emotions. Try not to go through these extreme highs and extreme lows, but try to find some balance there. Some consistency with how your mental state is. Also important, not just physical, tangible objects, but finding a balance with your heart. Yeah.
My question is this, when the Buddha decided to start eating again, what food items did he consider acceptable for him to eat?
Yeah. So the question around when the Buddha decided to eat again, what food items did he consider acceptable to eat, right? The teaching on this is very clear, right? When I say they, I'm meaning him and the disciples, and when the Sangha, the monastics, and the monks and nuns would go begging, it's called begging for alms. And if you get a chance, you go up to Metaforest Monastery up in Valley Center, or the Escondido area, they continue the life of the Buddha by following the Vinaya, which is the precepts. And there were anywhere from 227 to 311 precepts. They live by them, like literally. And so they do a morning alms round. I'll explain that in a minute. But it's kind of cool to see monks roaming around the monastery and lay people go up and provide the food for them. But it's cool to see them on the alms round. And so what the Buddha taught was that when they went begging for alms, they would go into the towns and they would go door to door, so to speak, and they would put up their head down and the bowl up. And they would get food. And they would, do this for a period of time. And then they would all come back. Some people obviously got more than others, but they would all come back and then they would kind of distribute the food to everybody, right? Whatever was in it, they ate. Right? Now, a couple things here with Buddhist teachings around attachment. Why would they put their head down and go like this? Why do you think?
To show humility.
Humility, yes, that's one reason, which is great. Do you like pizza?
Love it.
Okay, love it. Good. So I'm 1 for 2 right here on my examples, right? I love pizza also. So let's say you knock on door number 1 and they give you pizza, right? And you know that pizza came from them. The next day, what house do you think you're going to? Same house, right? You're like, hey, remember me yesterday? You gave me pizza. You got any more of that? You know? So it was humility, but also to not cultivate this attachment to craving and desire of getting what we want, but appreciating what we have, right? Make sense?
Yeah.
So that was the process of not connecting with the person or the food, just knowing that food went in your bowl. Then when they came back, they sat down and they shared the food and they ate 1 meal a day. That was it. And again, up at Metaphor, same thing. They go out, they eat 1 meal a day in the morning, and then that's all. They don't eat after that. Different Buddhist traditions today, I'm not going to get into that now, but different Buddhist traditions follow different kind of ways around eating. But that's the way the Buddha did it. Now, what always comes up around this, and it's way too late here to get into this topic, but often people use this as like the vegetarian or vegan topic, right? Newsflash for you, in case you didn't know. The Buddha ate meat. The Buddha ate fish. All those things. Whatever was in the bowl, they ate. But he had 3 conditions for eating any sort of meat or fish or anything that had been killed, right? Because we know the precept is to cause no harm. Not just to self or others, but to animals and any insects, everything, right? To cause no harm. So what the Buddha taught was that if you didn't see it be killed, if you didn't hear it be killed, and if it wasn't killed specifically for you, but it was an offering, and it was put in the bowl, then you would participate in eating that food, right? That if those conditions were there, you as an individual were not carrying the karma, the actions of that slaughtering of the animal, right? Now, often people use, like people who are, not vegan or vegetarian, use that as a justification and say, well, the Buddha ate meat. Here's the thing. Going door to door like this, begging for food once a day, is different than roaming through bonds. Again, I don't bring this up to tell you whether you eat meat or fish or not. That's all on you. But since you asked the question, I want to give a full picture here. That when we say the Buddha ate meat, understand what was happening for the Buddha to eat that, right? Which again is very different than us, roaming down, the poultry aisle or the meat aisle. So he ate what he was given.
What if it was rotten?
That's what killed him. He died at 80 from poisonous food. Yep. He had health issues, and apparently he knew that it was, that it was bad food, and he ate it so nobody else would, and that was the end. Yeah. So, obviously, again, be very careful here, especially for those who are new. This isn't like some lesson that just says eat anything that's put in front of you that's poison. Not the lesson here. All right. So
that's a big question about euthanasia.
yeah, and we're already past time, so definitely out of time for that one. But you table that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts or questions before we close? All right. We'll join palms. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May the merit gained be transferred to all of those who've been killed and lost lives during this pandemic, and their family and friends who suffer at this time, all of those in Ukraine and surrounding areas who suffer at this time, and all of the children and adults who lost lives in Texas, and their families and friends. and all of us who suffer at this time. May we all be at peace and free from the causes and conditions that lead to suffering. So, a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 15 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We don't eat one meal a day. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. So we do appreciate you showing up. Otherwise, we'd be talking to ourselves. Every night we have different practices going on, different people leading from their own Buddhist practice. Couple things that are back on the schedule. For those who don't know, we closed for 18 of the last 24 months. So we've been about 3+ months just open again, and most of our schedule is all back now. But the Day of Silence retreat has returned. That will be the first Saturday of the month. I believe June might have already filled up, but you can RSVP, for the next ones, and then we'll get a reminder out to you just to confirm you're still available. And also the Family Sangha has returned. We had a beautiful start a few weeks ago. So, parents, kids, toddlers, and even if you're a parent, the group tends to seem to center or focus around parents that have kids that are, 5, 7, 8 years old or 2 years old or whatever it is. But if you're a parent, you have a teenager, or you have a kid that's not coming or whatever, as a parent, you're still welcome to show up. It's not, you don't have to have a kid to get in the door, is my point. We just want to make that known because this is such a heavy time before the tragedy that just happened in Texas. This is a very difficult time in a pandemic and, kids being at home for so long and stuff like that. So if you're a parent, you're struggling, right now that's once a month on Saturday. It'll go back to twice a month in the fall, most likely. But that's been a really beautiful resource to have parents provide support for other parents, because that stuff's critical right now. So Buddha for You also was closed for 18 months. It's open. It's downstairs if you need anything. But we appreciate you being here. Kira and maybe Tom sticking around, and the crew will garden outside. So our gardening club will kick off outside. If you want to sweep for 5 minutes or an hour or whatever it is, or help water, pull leaves, they'll be outside working. So please help take care of the space. If somebody can, the trash cans in the hallway or in the bathroom up here and downstairs, if we can make sure somebody wants to volunteer, make sure those get emptied. We don't have a cleaning crew. We are all responsible for taking care of the space. And if nobody takes care of it, then it doesn't get taken care of. So we appreciate you being here. Wish you luck, and we'll see you soon.